Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives, and we learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, drum roll please, we have Pat Waters joining us. Pat is brand media director at the marketing agency Kolbeco and is the frontman for the Pat Waters Band. Pat is also a former colleague of mine from Kaplan, and I'm thrilled to introduce him to you today. We're going to focus on music, marketing, and the benefits of being or becoming multidimensional. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Andy. This is exciting. Sometimes I get to talk about just marketing, sometimes just music, and today we get to cover both. So I'm excited about it.
We're going to do a little bit more of this on the show because, as you know, my band is coming out with an album this fall, and we're going to do a little bit more crossover between the business side and the rock and roll side.
Yeah, there's parallels people don't realize. So.
Right, absolutely. Yep. Because music is a business.
That's true. If you're doing it right.
If you're doing it right. Well, Pat, before we get started, I ask all my guests this question. Please tell our listeners the short version of your story.
I don't have a lot of short stories, but I'll do my best. So I grew up in Western Wisconsin, the same small town I live in today. Went to college at UW-Eau Claire, studied communications while I was there. Upon graduation, immediately moved to a city where I had no connections with no professional experience in St. Louis, Missouri, where my then girlfriend was attending optometry school. So moved down there, and it took a little bit, but came on with a little marketing agency, a small marketing agency called Kolbeco at the time. Went to work for the owners of that agency, originally out of the spare bedroom of their house. Nice. And I was with them as we made a couple of office moves and moved up through the years. Spent, the first 3.5 years of my career there, had some great successes in the PR and marketing space. We got some, back when the news was something, we got a client in Newsweek. We got somebody on the Today Show. So like big stuff, and it was great to see that kind of impact to their business. Of course, nowadays those things don't hit quite like they used to when everybody watched, but, decided when my wife finished school to move back to Wisconsin, and that is where my Kaplan story started. So we moved back, and I found a position as a product marketing specialist within the Kaplan ecosystem, and stuck around there for about 13 years, minus a little stint where I went to work for a nonprofit. So worked for Kaplan right up till I guess right in mid throes of COVID, and had the opportunity to come back to Kolbeco and jumped after it. So, and I've been there the last 4 years.
That's awesome. Well, I did not know that we had that in common. You worked out of the founder of Kolbeco's spare bedroom.
I did. Yeah.
I worked out of Carl Swayzer's basement, his guest room, the garage. We basically took over. The business took over his entire house.
As I can imagine. Yeah.
Before we moved up here to La Crosse.
Did Carl have a dog that hated you?
No, it was cats.
Okay.
It was cats.
Did they hate you?
No, they had this cat that just laid everywhere, and we would place boxes in all around the office, and this cat would go from box to box. And that was the joke around the office. Yeah,
the Colbys had a dog that would greet me by barking at me every day when I showed up, and he'd bark me all the way to my office. And
nice.
Usually I get along with dogs. I'm not sure what was the deal there, but it's okay.
Well, I also ask my guests the rocket booster question. Other than working in the guest room, what was the moment in your career, your life, that just really accelerated your path?
So, Andy, I think it was two related moments that happened very close to each other. What I'm focused on today in terms of content marketing and helping brands tell their stories. Yeah. When I was working at Kaplan and I was working on the real estate team, my boss at the time, Tim Meyer, was starting to get into this thing called content marketing. And I didn't really have, I was too busy doing my work to want to pay too much attention to it. But he gave me a book called Epic Content Marketing by Joe Pulizzi, who is used to be the CEO, the founder of Content Marketing Institute. So I have a trip to Florida for work, and I packed the book in my bag. And I started reading it at the airport. And about an hour and a half into reading that book, I texted Tim and I said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my career.
Nice.
So that happened. And then in short succession after that, we reorganized the marketing department at Kaplan, and we created a digital marketing team. which included a content marketing manager position that I was fortunate enough to hold for 6 years. And so those two things really shaped the type of marketer that I want to be and the type of marketer I hope I am today and continue to strive to be.
Yeah. Well, I remember distinctly this moment because I was like, just sell stuff. What is this whole content marketing thing?
Yeah.
Why do we have to tell stories?
Right.
Because I grew up where you put a flyer into an envelope, you'd put a stamp on it, and you were able to send it out
Right.
to the specific audience that you wanted to talk to.
Absolutely.
All the canned spam stuff didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so this whole idea of building this story and this ecosphere of which content marketing plays a really big role.
Absolutely.
I really wish I would have gotten there faster and was able to support you more than I did in those initial moments, because at first I just wasn't getting it. I was like, yeah, this is cool, but what's this really going to do for
Right.
us to drive the top line?
Yeah. Well, it started getting attention in the company, I think, when we started going, no, look, these are leads that we're bringing in, and we're now able to sell real estate licensing, something we couldn't produce a lead list for.
Yeah.
Now we know people that want to get into the industry. So it made a huge difference. It was something we were able to leverage across all the brands at Kaplan, or all the product lines, I should say, at Kaplan. And it's still, that 6-year window of my career is something that was really special.
Yeah. I look back and I think, gosh, I really wish that I had a more open mind and was, and had the push from content marketing to start writing sooner than I did, and create the Andrew Tempte brand that could help, as CEO,
Absolutely.
help the business move forward. Because I was in a very unique position to do that, because I came from the educational worlds of the products that we were selling. So I had a voice that we could have used, but man, I had my heels dug in. So listeners, this is a lesson in mental agility and being more open-minded about possibilities and open-minded about change.
Well, I don't want to pretend that all of my ideas were good, Andy. I also tried to talk you into creating a Kaplan MySpace page in 2007. So that was one of the first conversations I had in your office.
Well, we probably could have learned from that that failure.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah. But there's so much to talk about today.
There is.
Let's start on the music side of the equation. Give us a glimpse into the early years before the Pat Waters Band. Why country, and what was inside you that said, I want to put myself out there?
There's one answer to both of those questions, and it is 2 words: Garth Brooks.
Really?
Honestly, Garth Brooks. I'm not as big a Garth fan as I was then today, but I had a family friend brought over a videotaped copy of this TV special called This Is Garth Brooks from NBC. And I'd been playing guitar since I was, this is 1992. I'd been playing guitar for a couple of years, trying to figure out who I was. I grew up on Van Halen and everything my brothers listened to, Def Leppard, and loved all of that stuff. But he brought over this videotape and I watched it, and I couldn't believe the way in a TV concert this guy was connecting with his audience. And so the songs had this depth and this richness to them. A lot of people make jokes about country music, but especially in the 90s, you go back and listen, there's some great depth and richness to lyrics and just emotion. Yet he was kind of putting on a bit of a rock show. Yeah. And I was like, man, the fact that he can blend those two and that he can reach people in the, in the upper echelons of the arena and make them feel like he knows they're there, I was instantly drawn to it. So that was my first step into country music. And I've gone, 100 miles an hour in after that. And performance was just after that, I kind of figured out what kind of musician I wanted to be. I'd just been kind of learning to play guitar, and now I had a goal in mind.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the Pat Waters Band and that journey. Why go the self-titled route? I have lots of jokes about Andy Tempte.
Sure.
because, you know, I've fought with this, you know, do I go the Andy Temte band? My listeners really don't want to know this, but I have very little hair on my body, and I look like I'm clean shaven under my shirt. So the joke was, let's call the band Andy Temte and the chest hair. None of that seemed to work.
Sure.
Why go the self-title route?
Well, for starters, I'm incredibly vain. So that I love me some me. No, I used to joke with people that the reason I went that route was because they could all leave the band, but they could never kick me out. The truth of the matter is it's much more practical than that. Came back from St. Louis with a record that I made down there under my own name. And once again, we're dating ourselves and talking about when things were things, but when radio was, it still is pretty powerful in country radio, but when radio was this huge catalyst, I had managed to get some radio play in Wisconsin under the name Pat Waters. So I knew what kind of a band I wanted to create. I knew my mission was to come back and make a name for Wisconsin country music. And I already had a song that was, you know, rocketing up the charts all the way to pewter. But we had some name recognition under my name. So I talked to the guys as we were forming the band, and I said, look, this is kind of what I want to do. And they were all on board. It's very interesting with musicians. Everybody assumes we're all extroverts. I've got a few guys in my band who disappear on break and don't want to talk to anyone.
Right.
I kind of have to be the guy shaking hands and kissing babies. So it works out okay that my name's on it. You know, some of them probably prefer it that way, but that's all it was. It was practical. We already had some name recognition to leverage. So
have you ever thought about going on the road and going full time? You know, have you been stood at that precipice?
Up until I was about 22 years old, that was plan A, B, and C. I didn't want to do anything else. And what it ultimately ended up being for me is I started thinking about other things I wanted in my life. You know how it is when you're, you know, a teenager coming up, it's all you can think about is, the tour bus would be awesome and going out and playing these huge shows. And, you know, the truth is that there's a lot more people never get to that level. A lot more people kind of suffer through a bunch of stuff. And I started to realize that while possible to have the kind of life I wanted to have in terms of a family, in terms of, you know, being a good spouse, while possible to pull all that off as a professional musician, it makes it a heck of a lot harder. And I just didn't want to really eventually decided I didn't want to put myself through that. And after that, you know, from a musical standpoint, that's where I sort of arrived to the conclusion of, okay, well, you know, I've seen these guys in Texas who are independent artists who've made this a thing down there, this Texas country music. So my goal was to come back here and make Wisconsin country music mean something.
Have you made an impact?
I like to hope so. You know, I mean, it's tough when you're close to it, but but 16 years in as the band, the Pat Waters band's been together 16 years. I feel like we've had the opportunity to do that. You know, we've got branded T-shirts that have the state of Wisconsin on them that sell really well. We get a chance to go play original music when we open up for some of our heroes and stuff like that. And I think it's starting to get the identity, but sometimes it's forest and trees, right? Like I'm in there, I'm in the thick of it. So years later, I'll step back and I'll have a better answer for you.
So how many songs have you written?
Oh, geez. Good ones?
Yes. Yeah. That's the qualifier for the question.
Good ones is less than 50 for sure. And great ones is less than 20, probably, in my opinion. Great. You know, I've probably sat down and started and sometimes finished thousands of songs. And then you listen to it the next day and you're like, why did I think that was so good last night?
Yeah. There was something going on yesterday.
Yeah.
We as I mentioned before, we have an album coming out this fall. It's got 9 songs on it. Nick, the producer of this show, and our son wrote one of them, and I wrote the other 8. And it only took me, 40 years to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm just astounded. Now I don't sit down and go, I'm going to sit with my guitar and I'm going to see if something comes out. I never do that.
Right.
For me, it's all I'm doing something else and it's going to come. It comes to me. And then I start the journey of writing the song, right? I start with fragments that come into my mind while I'm doing something else. I've never sat down and said, okay, I'm going to try to write something today.
I used to think that was the only way I could write, the way you're describing. Mm-hmm. And then I had children and I realized little children around the house and I was busy with other things. And I realized if I only wrote when I got inspired, I almost always had 7 other obligations at that moment.
Right.
So what I started to think about was, I know there's professional writers in Nashville who set writing appointments and they show up and write. Mm-hmm. So what I learned was I have to capture inspiration when it comes. I'll send myself a text message and then I store that up. And then when I get the time, I sit down and go, okay, which of these ideas looks good today? It doesn't always work out, but it was the only way I'd have time to write, so.
Yeah. Well, before we cut to commercial break, we're gonna make the switch after the break to the professional side of your life. What's the most important balancing act that you have to play between being Pat Waters of the Pat Waters Band and trying to influence the arc of country music in the state of Wisconsin and the Pat Waters who is a marketing professional?
I think the most important balancing act in my life comes down to time and attention. And am I giving what I'm doing right now my complete and full attention? Yeah. And that's those 2 aspects that you talked about, but it's also my family life. Am I able to unplug from music and work when it's time to be with my kids and my wife and just be with my kids and my wife? It's not always easy, as anybody who's living a very full life goes. I'm blessed in all 3 aspects, those 3 aspects of my life. And I think the balance is never letting one of them become my entire identity. Yeah. Making sure that I'm leaning into the places I need to be when I need to be there. I probably fail more than I succeed at that, but I'm trying really hard.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about multidimensionality when we get back from this really short commercial break.
Sounds good.
Hey, it's Andy here. I've got a new podcast I'd like to introduce you to, The Saturday Morning Muse. Start your weekend with me by exploring topics that span leadership, business management, education, and other musings that are designed to support your journey of personal and professional continuous improvement. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. And we're back with Pat Waters talking about music marketing and being or becoming multidimensional. Pat, let's shift gears to your primary vocation, which is marketing. Mm-hmm. Please introduce us to Kolbeco beyond the I grew up in the guest room at my boss's house. So introduce us to Kolbeco. And for new marketing graduates, what makes working in an agency environment rewarding versus being embedded in business?
Well, I have the advantage of having done both, right?
Yeah.
So, Kolbeco is having done both. I've experienced agencies from both sides, from both the I'm serving clients and from the I'm being served. Without a doubt, Kolbeco is the agency that, in my experience, that dives in deeper than anybody else. We want to get to know you. We want to get to know why you started this business or why you do what you do. We want to really, more importantly, know your customers. And we want to help you figure out, because you'd be surprised how many people don't understand what success looks like for you. If we're trying to get from it's not really A to B, it's A to Z. What are all the letters in between and how do we hit those spots?
Right.
So the thing that Kolbeco does differently than I think almost any other agency I've ever experienced is we dive deep. We ask a lot of questions. Discovery is the biggest portion of the start of our relationship. And from there, it doesn't stop. We continue to go, how's this working for you? Is this still what you're trying to accomplish? It's a really exciting place to work at. And we've got a great team of marketing professionals, really intelligent, really talented people that, we just work really well together. And so that's exciting. Agency versus internal. It's a very funny story because when I came back from St. Louis and went to work at Kaplan, I thought, I was just down there working for 20 different clients in a week. How are they going to keep me busy working on one product line? Right. Well, it turns out an internal marketer has different responsibilities, and which I learned over time. So the thing I love about agency life, though, is in any given day, on a slow day, I'm working in 5 different industries, for the most part. We're bouncing from client to client and sort of working on project to project. You're having meetings with this client, and then you've got work to do for that client. So the exposure that you get just to the world of work is amazing in terms of being able to see how certain industries operate, what the commonalities are, what the differences are. The other side of agency life that is exciting, I think, is that we don't the team doesn't think of things through one lens. So if you're internal and focused on something within one business, you kind of have a little bit of tunnel vision. You have to be successful at it.
Right. In
agency life, there are things that I can learn in this industry that I go, what would that look like if we brought that over to, the scale industry or something like that, So we're serving B2C audiences, B2B audiences. And I love the ability to sort of have a holistic approach and be able to see everything, in the industry.
So how do you deal with context switching? Because if you're on a slow day, if you're working with 5 different clients, 5 different industries, how do you go, okay, this meeting is ending and I'm going to press the end button on Zoom and I'm going to press the start button on this and I'm in a completely different place with a completely different set of people. What's your tool that you use to go, okay, switch, and now I'm going to be productive here? Because people really struggle with that.
Yeah. For one, I am a very religious note taker. So when I'm in this conversation, I have to be able to capture this conversation that you and I are having. We've got momentum going here. We've got ideas. I have to capture all that because I may not get to work on that right away this afternoon. I might have to come back to that in 3 days. Right. So that's the biggest thing, but I don't know. It's a little bit like taking off hats and putting on hats. Like I can literally just kind of come out of a conversation and then go, okay, now I have to write this article for somebody, and I switch hats. And of course there's, any motor takes a little bit of time to fire up, but I've gotten fairly efficient. If I sat here and said, like, I know exactly how I do it, I don't,
Have you had former colleagues who just, they got to quit because it's like, okay, I just can't do this. I need to work on this.
I think I can't think of specific people, but I know people from my past who I could point to and be like, yeah, this wouldn't be for you, because it's not, it isn't for everybody. But if you're the kind of person who really enjoys kind of being involved in a lot of different places, it's a very rewarding experience.
Well, let's talk about multidimensionality. You're the frontman for the Pat Waters Band. You're a marketer in an agency with all these things coming at you. How does being the frontman of the Pat Waters Band help you in your day job?
I've got 2 answers for that. And the first one is, I think that to walk into a room full of people who are all looking one direction and to be willing, take performance out completely, to be willing to stand in that room for 4 hours and look the other direction, you got to have something wrong with you to begin with, right? Like, so there's something that comes from, look, I'm confident enough to be able to stand in front of this room of people facing them and believe that I'm going to entertain them for 4 hours. Sure. So there's an element to that if you can carry that into your work life as you're having conversations with different people, as you're, occasionally engaging in public speaking, as you're driving up here to have this conversation with you today, that if you can leverage that confidence that you develop as a performer into other spaces of your life, that's of course beneficial. The other thing for me is a big part, my job title is brand media director, but it might as well be chief storyteller. You know what I mean?
Right.
Client storyteller, because a big part of what I do is, how do I make your brand relatable? Well, songwriting. How do you take a huge story idea in your head and condense it down to 3.5 minutes? Anybody who knows me knows brevity is not my strong suit. But when you learn to do that through songwriting, you learn how to kind of develop a story arc and how to see so I think songwriting has been huge for me, a very beneficial skill in helping me learn how to write for other audiences.
Yeah. So listeners, this is a very important point. Storytelling is one of the most important skills in business. And I really have come to appreciate my time in the music industry, growing up in a musical family, because when you're involved in music, whether you are singing, playing the violin, you are telling a story.
Absolutely.
And you're learning how to create those feelings and tap into folks' soul, their, how and to help them feel joy, love, sadness, etc. And that applies in the world of business as well. So if you're sitting out there thinking business is just cookie cutter and pick up an instrument,
Yeah.
learn a foreign language,
Right.
do stretch your mind in other ways.
Well, and from a performance perspective, the other thing I've learned, I conducted a social experiment while fronting the band one time. This is just a few years ago. And I was like, I bet you I can improve people's enjoyment of the show with my face. So I started making eye contact and smiling at people throughout the crowd. I just move it, not in a creepy way, I hope. I hope not. But I'd move throughout the crowd person to person while I was singing instead of closing my eyes and always being, sometimes you're there, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the right emotion to be conveying. But as I'm singing through a happy song and I'm trying to get you guys excited and I'm trying to inspire you to get off your feet and dance, or, you're playing a bar and your job is to sell beer, try to get you to slam the one you got and go get another one. I recognize that the ability to connect with you as a human being is as easy as looking you in the eye and smiling at you. And that's not just a music thing. That's an everything thing.
Yes, absolutely. I talk about skills a lot. Let's focus on marketing specifically. And I like to run the thought experiments. You've got right now, I'm going to play the role of a new marketing grad from the University of wherever. What are 2 skills that you're just passionate about? Andy, you've got to really focus on these 2 skills.
Absolutely. Communication is a very broad thing to say, but I'll tell you what I mean by that. And they're both going to sound like human skills, not soft skills.
Yes, human skills.
They're both going to sound like human skills because they are both kind of human skills. But the first one is communication. And that is when I talked about storytelling a little bit. Yeah. Can you convey what you want to convey with words, with body language, with some type of communication? Because, and that leads into my second one, but adaptability is number 2. And the reason communication and adaptability are so important is it doesn't matter what the channels are. Whatever we have today, 10 years from now, it's going to be different. And that's where adaptability comes in. Yeah. But it doesn't matter what the channels are if you can't if you can't communicate effectively. They're all useless, you know. And adaptability, because the jobs I do today, most of the work I do today didn't exist 10 years ago. And I'm not naive enough to not realize that it won't exist 10 years from now. So in marketing especially, and I'm sure it's true in other lines of work, I know it's true as AI is coming in and changing the way we all work. The technology that we use today is going to be obsolete at some point. So you should definitely figure out how to use it today. Yeah. But don't be so rigid, and to think that, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. I'm going to be an Instagram marketer the rest of my life. Instagram it'll either not be here 10 years from now or it'll look nothing like it does today.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, as we close out the show, I got 3 really quick lightning round questions, and you got to be quick on these. So we work together at Kaplan. What's your favorite Kaplan story?
I don't know that it's a story, but my favorite Kaplan memory is the people. Yeah. We had an exceptional team.
Didn't we?
I'm speaking, very specifically to the marketing team, but as a whole company, exceptional team of human beings there in the window of time that I was there. And that's when I think back on that opportunity and that, span of my life, it's the relationships and the people, a lot of which I'm still friends with. So
yeah, awesome. I put you in a time machine. I love asking the time machine question. Okay. You can send a really short version of a really short message to an earlier version of you. Yeah. What's the message? What earlier version of you do you send it to?
I go back to 15-year-old me and I say, music's not the only thing. Try other things. Yeah. I became so obsessed with becoming the type of musician I wanted to be that I didn't do other things that I wish now that I would have done, and things that I loved and enjoyed. Sports in particular, I stopped playing baseball at 14 years old. I loved baseball. I never played football, even though I love the sport of football. Right. Never played because a broken arm is like 3 months in a cast and you can't play guitar.
Right.
So I made a lot of short-term decisions that had a long-term impact. And so I would go back to myself, and it's not just those things, but it's just, put yourself out there more, try more things. I probably would have still ended up where I am today doing the things that I'm doing because I love those things, but I didn't allow myself to take more chances and try more things and take a chance on not loving something, Yeah. So
yeah. Awesome. What are you working on? Here, what are you working on in your development journey?
Patience. Not just the patience to wait, patience in all aspects. So As kids get older, as my kids get older, my 12-year-olds find new ways to challenge me all the time.
All the time.
And new ways to test me. And I'm learning, and I'm trying to get better. And every once in a while I'll catch myself in the middle of losing whip and I go, you know what? I'm not right now. You're right. And I have to kind of correct myself, but patience across everything and taking a positivity towards things will work out. We're going to have to go through rough patches, in work and in music and in family life. And that's what life really is. So I think trying to be better about not instantly reacting in the moment to things that happen. I tell my kids all the time, not everything that happens is happening to you. And I could take that advice myself sometimes. Yeah. And just sit back and recognize, okay, that's a thing. It happened. How are we going to react to it?
Yeah. So where can people learn about the Pat Waters Band as well as Kolbeco?
Absolutely. So the Pat Waters Band is patwatersband.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram at the PWB. And you can find our schedule and everything else there and merch that we got for sale. The Kolbeco experience is at kolbeco.net. That's KOLBECO.net.
Awesome. Pat, it's been fantastic
to
speak with you today. My name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act Podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your colleagues. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act. The show was produced by Nicholas Tempty.